بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sadia. How are you?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm good, alhamdulillah.
Thank you for joining me for this conversation. We intentionally organize these conversations just so that people in the Muslim community can be aware of, some of our community's work, different initiatives, different books that are being authored. MashaAllah, you've done a lot and you're doing a lot. And I wanted to talk to you about a few things, but before doing so, maybe you should introduce yourself.
Okay, so I live in Michigan. I'm an endocrinologist, so hormone doctor. I am the author of the book, The Crowning Venture, Inspiration from Women Who Have Memorized the Quran. It has a companion journal that goes along with it. I have an interest in holistic medicine and also in transformational leadership.
So the crowning venture, I want to get straight into it because I actually spent some time at a madrasa, at a kutab, doing hifz. And, number one, many people don't realize how demanding tahfidh al-Quran is. It's not the initial memorizing, but the muraja'ah, the review, and it's a journey. It's a journey. That's the first thing. I think a lot of people. I think, unfortunately, due to how can I say this delicately? I think some people have accepted this idea that rote memorization is, and I think that this is a post-colonial kind of idea, right? That rote memorization doesn't really show intellectual depth. It doesn't show, analytical ability, etc. So that's one part of our community that doesn't understand the gifts of memorization to begin with. And then the other part that I think you can speak to, quite effectively, is that there are a lot of women who memorize the Quran. I think when people think about tahfidh al-Quran, they think about hifz, they think about it as being an enterprise that young men are primarily engaged in. So what did you have in mind when you now you didn't mention it, but you did memorize the Quran?
Yes. So the book, The Crowning Venture, starts out with my story in memorizing the Quran in Syria. And like you said, I spent that year there doing my first memorization. And since then, after going through the first time, we realized it's an everyday part of my life.
Yes.
And it can be challenging. It can be rewarding. It can be joyful. It can be, again, challenging, at times. But it's the beauty and the reward, inshallah, that comes from it is immense. It's uncomparable. I like how you started out talking about how a lot of people, especially with this, like you said, maybe post-colonial viewpoint, that rote memorization is useless. And in fact, so there's even in the Muslim community, there is sometimes a belief that reciting the Quran in Arabic is not that important if you don't understand Arabic. So I will read the translation. So there's a lot of things floating around when it comes to reciting Quran in Arabic as a first step and then memorizing. What I want to speak to is that the question that a lot of people will ask, is this something that I should do? Especially younger people are, and it's very valid. Is this something that I should spend my time doing? So I want to speak to that. Now, when it comes to the Quran, of course, if one doesn't understand Arabic yet or cannot read Arabic, the translation is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity for people to come close to the Quran.
Yeah.
And what I want to stress is that even though my journey and many people's journey, and even though this book is about the memorization of Quran, ultimately the most important thing for every single Muslim on this planet that I wish for and that you wish for, I'm sure, is for them to have a relationship with the Quran, whatever it looks like. So start out, the most important thing is to have a relationship with the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to, let's take it the next step. That relationship can start with reading translation until one knows Arabic. It can start at alif bata, learning the alphabet. For some people, that is their relationship, and that is alhamdulillah. At every single point, we honor every single point of that journey. The journey continues. Now, for me, I did not go to Syria. I did not start out with this goal of memorizing the Quran. I went there because I had 3 weeks off before. I actually had 4.5 months off before I was starting medical school. I went there initially for 3 weeks to dabble in Arabic, because you can't really learn Arabic in 3 weeks. So, now I realize that I should just call it dabble in Arabic, because
Well, it was an ambitious goal. Himma aliyah. Himma aliyah.
Yeah. And, when I was there, I met NC Tamara Gray, Dr. Tamara Gray. I had learned a little bit of Tajweed before I went. So she listened to, there was a bunch of us Americans there. She listened to each person recite Quran. When she heard me recite, she said, if you can extend your trip, you can get your ijazah to teach Tajweed. Now, at that time, this was before the internet blew up and all these opportunities were available. So the only way that you could learn Tajweed is if you had a teacher in your city. At that time, then it was important to get a lot of teachers all around the world who could support people in learning how to recite Quran properly, which is the very least that we should aim for, is that can we recite it properly. It was during that journey where I spent day and night reciting Quran, working on my ijazah, the certificate to teach Tajweed, that I developed a very deep connection with the Quran, a love for the Quran. It's just the natural next step that comes when you spend time reciting it. And I want to point out that I did not speak Arabic at that time. Remember, I went thinking I'm going to start my Arabic journey. So I did not really understand a lot of Arabic. But that's the miracle of the Quran, and that's the beauty of reciting it in Arabic.
MashaAllah.
And so that's the first thing that I wanted to address, is that regardless of where you are in that journey, a good first goal and intention is to learn how to recite it properly.
I had a similar journey with the Quran. I converted to Islam in maybe my 3rd year of high school. And I initially read Yusuf Ali's translation of the Quran. And I was absolutely captivated by that translation. It was something about the directness of the Quran that really just grabbed me. It felt the way, if when I would read the Quran, I would think, if I were omnipotent and I were, omniscient, this is how I would speak. There was a directness to the Quran that really captured me, and I wanted to learn more about the Quran. And so somebody told me about a madrasa, right? A Darul Ulum madrasa, right? A madrasa that was kind of an extension of Deoband in the greater Chicago area, a town called Elgin. So I went there and I said, I'd like to learn some Quran. And the acting rector at that time invited me to attend school there without paying anything. So I started, like everybody, with the qaida of the Quran and just, learning the letters, and then doing what we called, nazara, or just reading from the Quran. And then shortly after that, I started memorizing the Quran. Now, the thing that ended up being a big challenge for me was I memorized Quran, but I wasn't patient, right? I wasn't patient. I think, like a lot of younger Western students, I wanted to get into the ulum. Like I want to learn Arabic. And my teachers would tell me, "Al-Quran miftahun li kulli ilm." The Quran is the key for every knowledge. But I was too impatient. And I think some of that bias that I spoke of had also affected me. Like, I'm just memorizing.
Mhm.
I want to study law. I want to study legal theory. I want to study mustalahatul hadith. I want to study hadith terminology. And so I started to study those things more, and I started to memorize Quran less. I ended up leaving school there. I went to Yemen for some time, and then I enrolled at Azhar. Once I'm at Azhar, it's a full course of study. And a lot of the Quran that I memorized at the madrasa, the hifd became mutaza'za. It became like kind of shaky. Um, then I couldn't recall some of what I memorized. And I was very guilty. I felt very guilty about having forgotten some of the Quran. And that guilt, believe it or not, like prevented me from the Quran for some time. And just recently, maybe a couple years ago, one of my mashayikh, one of my teachers said, you have to get back to just reading the Quran for hidayah. Once you're reading the Quran, and look, whatever happened in terms of you not maintaining your hifz, qadr Allahu ma sha fa'ala. It happened, right? It's something that you feel nedim, you feel remorse about it, but it happened. That shouldn't prevent you from the book of your Lord. That shouldn't prevent you from guidance. And so I started back just reading the Quran comfortably with a little less guilt. And then afterward, of course, the natural next step is wanting to re-engage the memorization of the Quran again.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So we all have a Quranic odyssey, right?
Mhm.
We have a Quranic odyssey. So the crowning venture.
Mhm.
So you memorized the Quran, and I think it's worth mentioning, you still, went to medical school, because we see that
Mhm.
your doctor, Sadia Mian, so you
Mhm.
still went to medical school.
Mhm.
Um, when did you decide that you wanted to write a book that captured the experiences of women that have memorized the Quran?
So yes, I want to just go back to what you said about guilt.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot to see if you've read my book or not, but there is a whole chapter called "Guilt Gold Guide." That
Yeah.
because it's and as I've coached women in Quranic memorization, I teach the class for Rabat. The
Mhm.
initially I used to start out teaching tips and tricks to how to memorize, but
Mhm.
as I went through, I realized that mindset was so important, and that was one of the things that was holding people back more than anything else. If we can
Mm.
manage our minds,
Mm.
the journey is actually it's there for the taking.
Mm.
Yes, it has its ups, it has its downs, but just like anything in life, how we do one thing is how we do everything. So
Right.
the same way that we manage our minds when it comes to Quran is probably showing up elsewhere in our lives. And so what you mentioned about guilt, what I focus with my students is we're not going to have these I don't want you to sit down and in your Quranic memorization time end it with self beat up.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't want this to be a journey of always being stressed out, feeling like I'm not doing good enough.
Mhm.
What I
Mhm.
focus on is it's a very small it's not that large of a number, but I focus on 20 minutes every day. That's
Oh,
that's what we do in the class. The way to pass the class by the end, I kind of added up, ends up being 1,200 minutes. So every day, 20 minutes is going to be your memorization time. We're not going to look at, okay, how much did you get done in that time? Of course, we know if you get to that point where you're memorizing Quran, you're probably an overachiever. You're probably somewhat type A. You're a hard worker. I'm not worried that you're not going to work hard. I'm worried now at this point that how do you keep yourself motivated and manage your mind throughout this journey? So
Mhm.
that's it, 20 minutes a day. Fine. If you miss a day, big deal. You make up for it.
Mhm. Allahu Akbar.
Mhm.
Allahu
And
Akbar.
this is not just during this class, then this 20 minutes will be your life. You commit, the intention is that every single day for the rest of my life, those 20 minutes are going to be there with the Quran.
Allahu Akbar.
Of course, if there's an emergency, etc., yes, that's a different story. But the
Yeah.
intention is, okay, at whatever stage I'm at. So and then at the end of it, being grateful. Okay, I sat there for 20 minutes with the Quran. I didn't memorize the page I wanted to memorize, or the five, or the five ayats, whatever stage. Everybody's at a different place,
Sure.
but ending it with, alhamdulillah, that I spent those 20 minutes with the Quran, because I could have spent those 20 minutes easily on my phone. It wouldn't have really counted for me for the here. I spent 20 minutes that are gonna count for me, inshallah, in the hereafter.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu
A-
Akbar.
It's just a change of mindset. So it's not like, oh, let me just quickly get this done. Let me get my memorization done. No, this is my life. It's a part of my life. It's a part of my schedule.
Mm.
And that's made a big difference for my students. They tell me that. They're like, this was just such a paradigm shift, because they would
Mm.
get caught up in, okay, like 6 months, I'm really good. I'm doing 2 hours a day. Actually, it doesn't usually even last 6 months. It's like, the goals, we start out with a big goal, do it for a little while, and then peter out and just completely stop.
Mhm.
And then comes the guilt,
Yep, yep, yep.
So, so yeah, it's just, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is generous.
Allahu Akbar.
And in this journey, we learn so much about how we view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm.
Do I feel like, I tell my students, do you feel like, okay, you're a person who has come this far. You have worked on perfecting your tajweed. You are yearning to memorize his words, and yet
Mhm.
you're always down on yourself.
La ilaha illallah.
But this is Allah. I mean, do we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gonna punish us for, okay, I sat there but I didn't do enough. So,
Mm.
subhanAllah, really, how we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is how we see him.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu
And
Akbar. No, I mean this is such consolation for those of us that have struggled with our relationship with the Quran, and guilt is a big part of it. When you feel like I haven't prioritized the Quran like I should have, I didn't maintain my hiv the way I should have. Is Allah Ta'ala going to resurrect me on Qiyamah blind? Because I forgot some of the verses of the Quran that I memorized, and these are serious issues that people work through in trying to establish a healthy, nourishing, lifelong relationship with the Book of Allah.
yeah,
And
I just do want to mention that there's a whole chapter about forgetting, this whole concept of forgetting, because now this may happen in other cultures. I hear it a lot in the Indo-Pak culture. That's my background, that it's better to not memorize the Quran at all than to memorize it and forget it. And that has stopped how many people from starting any kind of journey with the Quran because of that. So when I was writing this book, I and I'll tell the story in a moment how it came about. I decided this was such an important issue, it needed its own chapter. And so I did research into this. What does it mean to, quote unquote, forget the Quran? Is a person who memorizes and forgets, are they going to be punished? What are the legal rulings? That's an important question. It's easy to throw around a lot of, I heard this or I heard that. So there's a whole chapter devoted to this. I went deeply into legally, what does that mean? And
can you share some of your findings?
yeah, so it's actually really beautiful. The books that I read, in fact, I worked with my Arabic teacher. We translated them because there wasn't a whole lot in English.
Mhm.
So number one, the number one point, um, I will mention is that, first of all, you cannot call the person who has memorized and forgotten. We don't call them an atham. You know,
Mm.
we don't call them,
Essentially.
right, exactly. We don't call them a sinner. Um, but memorizing and forgetting. So the whole point is that, number one, the nature of learning anything is that we forget it.
Mhm.
The,
Right.
the nature of knowledge. What is the nature of knowledge? Because honestly, if I could have gone through medical school and read something once, or even memorized it once and never forgotten it, it would have been so easy. Like, why is med school so hard?
Sure.
Because
Sure.
you have to review, like, you go over
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
again and again and
Mhm.
again. So first of all, just saying, okay, it's a given, we're going to forget.
Mhm.
And so that's number one. It's like, first of all, just, don't think that, oh, once you memorize it, you're never going to forget it. Number two, that it's actually a blessing. If we look at it as a blessing, because it brings us to spend more time with the Quran when we review.
That is a paradigmatic shift.
Yeah.
It's that, when you forget something, you have to spend more time, refreshing your memorization. So in that is khair, is blessing and good.
There's reward in it. I mean, if we look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rewarding us for every letter, 10 rewards. And how many times are you going through? So there's reward in that. There's cleansing in that. There's protection in that. It's and it keeps that connection always alive.
Allah.
And then the other thing is that what it's talking about when we look at what does the word nasiya mean, the root, okay, forget. And what does this concept of forgetting the Quran mean? It doesn't mean that, oh, you memorized and then you forgot. It means that you are leaving the journey, that you are forgetting the journey. So what is blameworthy is you memorize it and then you put it on a shelf and that's it. That's blameworthy. But a person who has memorized it and is keeping a relationship with the Quran, even if they're struggling to remember, that's not the point. Is that you keep that relationship going. And that's where the 20 minutes I find has been golden. It's been, it's just like you said, it's a paradigm shift. So those are some of the points that are brought up in some of the books that I read, and all of the hadith and everything, the ayats, they're in the book, The Crowning Venture. The other point is that there's even ayats, when we look at, we go deeply into the root of the word, forget in the Quran. It's sometimes, when we say that, like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgotten them, because they forgot him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't forget people, right?
Of course.
So there's another meaning to that word. And then it ends with a very beautiful thing. Just that, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as we think of him,
Allah Akbar.
And the remembering that the guile of of shaitan, like shaitan is weak. He's not powerful. So remembering those two things, remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. And that's part of, actually, even with myself in my own journey, I have gone through it all. Do I still sometimes feel guilty that I have not done better? Yes, every single day. Like, I feel, gosh, I just really wish that in my review, I was farther along. But I bring myself to, as I've taught my students, that we cannot fall into that. That's despair. That is of shaitan. Getting us so paralyzed, going into analysis paralysis, going into self-deprecation, self-beat up, instead of every single day is a new day. And my Lord is a merciful Lord. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful.
Allah Akbar. So, now the Crowning Venture is not just about Quranic memorization generally. It's about women that have memorized the Quran. Now, clearly you are a woman, but was there something about women's journey with the Quran that you wanted to capture with this book that was unique, that was different than just writing a book about Quranic memorization, men, women, but you wanted to focus on women? Was there a reason for that?
Absolutely. There's no doubt. So just how the book came about, 2015. So this was many years after I've memorized. I was in an airplane with one of my friends, Dr. Sonia and Nancy Tamra, and we were flying back from Sweden after a Muslim Women's Conference. And Nancy Tamra just turned to me and said, "Why don't you write a book about memorizing Quran?" And I pulled out my phone right there, wrote out a whole outline, like what should be in this book, what would I want in this book. And what I found is that women who have memorized don't talk about having memorized. A lot of women keep it secret. They don't want people to know that they have memorized the Quran.
Wow.
They even some of my friends, we didn't, share with each other where we were in our journey. I didn't even know that one of my close friends had completed it. So there's so many emotions and maybe stigmas
Hmm.
around this that a lot of women don't share it. So, for example, in the book I talk about in one interview, this friend of mine didn't share it because she felt people were going to think that she thinks she's better than people, or now she can't have fun, she can't laugh.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of that feeling of imposter syndrome. I don't know it well enough, which I mean I have faced as well,
Hmm.
which I've looked at in myself. Did I want to actually? Uh, I didn't really want to, open this up to the world and let everybody know about myself either, or even have Hafiza on the cover.
Hmm.
Of course, my editors had their way with that, but yeah, I mean, I get to look at, well, why are we not sharing? Because there's a quote by Marion Edelman, right? Edelman.
Okay.
You can't be what you can't see.
Mm.
And
Yeah, no, that's solid. That's solid. That's
yeah,
solid.
so for the girls and the women of this generation, um, you know, we need to share this so that they can see and we can become their vision.
Hmm.
It's hard to have a vision of something when you don't see anybody out there like, doing this. When I grew up, I knew one woman who had memorized the Quran, and she came from a very, very religious family of like muftis, and it wasn't something that I ever thought that could be me or that I could relate to. And it was when I went to Syria and I saw women who it was kind of a given that, oh yeah, everybody just memorizes Quran, but they're still doctors, teachers, lawyers, mothers, like they're doing
Mashallah.
everything.
Which is
It's
also, I wanted you to speak to that too, because there's two tendencies that I encounter in Muslim communities. One is this belief that that level of engagement with the Quran or religious studies generally will lead to you know uh, you know uh, failure in every other kind of worldly endeavor. Like, if you memorize the Quran, you'll never be quote unquote successful, right? It will, in a sense, it's a kind of an impediment to the kind of careerist mentality that is promoted in some quarters of our community. And then the other thing is that I feel like our young women, are not encouraged to pursue religious studies. They're not encouraged to pursue an active engagement with the memorization of the Quran. And I want, like, sometimes I see even within one family, the son is memorizing the Quran,
Mhm.
the son is studying Arabic, the son is going to Sunday school, and sometimes with our young women, there's this subtle or not so subtle attitude that as long as you cover your hair, you don't have to do anything else. Like, that's it. That's enough. And mashallah, it. I mean, the um, the um, the weight of being publicly identified with Islam is great.
Mhm.
Especially in a context like ours. And I want to salute Muslim women that wear hijab for that. But they still should also be encouraged to pursue, greater connection, greater engagement, deeper involvement with the text of our religion. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so what I want to mention is exactly what you said. Many, many, many years ago, after I had come back and memorized, I remember that a family that we know very well. So uncle and auntie came to our house. They live in a different state, and they were visiting some family friends. All of their sons, it was given, they all memorized, but their daughters had not. And I remember when I told auntie, or my mom had told her that I memorized the Quran and I just came back from Syria, etc. I thought she would be happy. She would be a supporter. And at the time she said, bete, which means, like my child, whatever, uh, girls shouldn't memorize Quran because, they're going to have so much housework when they grow up. They won't, be able to review. Who's going to do the housework? And, of course, for me at that time, it was kind of like taking a bubble and just popping it, I mean, a balloon. But subhanallah, times have changed, because that same auntie a couple years back, she came to our house and she proudly pulls me to the side and she tells me that not only have multiple of her granddaughters memorized the Quran, she said many of her great granddaughters have, and she said every single one of them is somewhere in the journey of memorizing, and she's proud.
Allah, Allah.
So times have changed, and
Yeah.
the way it's not. Why does it have to be an either or? That's my whole point. Why does it have to be an either or?
Mhm.
Now, is it something that requires time? Yes. Does it require energy and commitment? Yes. Everything in life does.
Sure.
But what I want to make the point, like you said, that memorizing Quran, it does something to an individual that anything else you do in life is going to be even better. So
Mhm.
whatever you decide to do in life,
Mhm.
so for the woman who, the girl who has memorized Quran, she decides, she wants to be a doctor. It's gonna make her a better doctor. It's gonna be there with her. That's something that is inside your heart, and
Mhm.
that connection is, I can't really explain it in words, what it does to memorize, but I want to get this across, that it really deepens faith. It strengthens this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, we have to remember that's what it's about.
Yes.
We're not memorizing just to memorize. We're not, it's about Allah. It's about our relationship with Him. It's about our faith. And anytime our faith is stronger, anything that we do is going to be more beautified.
Mhm.
Whatever career path, if you choose whatever you choose to do
Mhm.
in life, will it make you a better mother? I mean, inshallah, it does. And also now you have this gift that you can support your children with. Think of it
Mhm.
that way.
Mhm.
And it's very grounding. Quran is a very grounding, this relationship, the recitation of the Quran is very grounding. Like,
Mhm.
we all need it.
Mhm.
Nowadays, there are a million. It's a fad out there. Everybody, it's interesting. Everybody is searching for, how can I get more grounded? How can I
Mhm.
relax my nervous system? How can I, like? There's all these different kinds of meditations.
Mhm.
Um, Quran is much more than all that, but it includes all of that.
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, no, it's amazing. I once heard this story, and this I think the story was about ruqya. Stories about
Mhm.
ruqya. Like healing with the Quran. But and I'm sure you've probably come across this story. But there was a qari in a village, and he used to do ruqya. And someone told, a Western trained doctor. Mashallah, you're both characters in the story, in one, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Somebody told a Western trained doctor about this, and he said, "No, that's nonsense. You can't heal anybody or treat anybody with words. You have to, make more substantive medical interventions if you want to, change someone's, physiology. If you want to change the physiognomy, you have to use antibiotics and medicines and things like that." And so someone told the Qadi that he said this, and he said, "You know what? Tell him I'd like to meet with him." And so they come together, and immediately the Qadi talks about his mom. He says an insult to his mom, and he says another insult to his family. And the man is like flushed, he turns red, he starts sweating, he starts screaming. And the Qadi said, "Look at how I've changed your state.
Mhm.
And all I said was some words.
Mhm.
You don't think that all of this has been accompanied by physiological change?
Mhm.
All I mentioned was words. And
Mhm.
these are just nonsense, inappropriate words.
Mhm.
What then about the book of Allah? Right? What then about what the book of Allah can do to us physically? How it can give us presence and calm us and
Mhm.
soothe us if we commit to it. And that story always resonated with me,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay.
So you were saying, so you are an endocrinologist
Mhm.
and you're a hafidah of the Quran. Do those two things ever intersect in like some interesting ways that you might want to share?
Um, Well, when it comes to like, so as a hormone doctor, and also I have this, I'm trained in holistic medicine, functional
Mm,
medicine,
mm,
and a lot of, through the years, my, even how I view medicine and how I treat patients and support them, and not just like staying alive. That to me is not really health, but in well-being.
mhm,
So much of it I see is disease is related to stress. It's
mm,
related to emotions.
mhm,
There's such a link between the two. And I mentioned about the relaxation bit, how
mm,
so the nowadays the vagus nerve is also getting a lot of attention,
mhm,
which is the rest and relaxation nerve.
mhm.
And a lot of times I would say that people in society nowadays are chronically in a state of fight or flight. So
Wow.
just chronic stress. Even if it comes to consistently checking our phones, we're never disconnected.
Mhm,
The world, the pace of how fast the world is changing, and just how life goes on a day-to-day basis.
mhm,
So people are chronically stressed, and I see that in my patients. So like when it comes to Quran, again, it's there's the reward in it. There's the spiritual, there's the reward that we get, the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the increase in faith. But there is also that like you've mentioned, the physiologic response that occurs with the recitation of the Quran. In fact, if you look at a list of what things activate the vagus nerve and help a person relax, humming,
mhm.
singing, Quran is better than that. I'm not even like, there's no comparison.
Sure.
But and that's why, that's for me, spending all that time reciting out loud, working on my ijaz and tajweed, there was something so special in that. And that is what I wish for people, to have that experience where you are able to recite and enjoy your own recitation out loud. And there's something just so soothing and healing about that. These are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. Now, what you mentioned about, I mean, and it's very interesting also how you mentioned, because when I first came back from Syria, after having spent hours and hours every single day that whole summer with the Quran, working on my ijaza, we had 1 week later I started medical, or 4 days later I started medical school. The
Oh,
first week, yeah, it was intense. And that first week we had icebreakers, so we were in groups of 8, and we wrote down on note cards one thing we want to give to each person and one thing we want to take from them.
hmm.
And without fail, every single person, they wrote something to the effect of, I want your inner peace. You seem
Wow.
so peaceful, you seem so calm.
La ilaha.
And for me, being a person who, believe me, that we talked about, like that type A, perfectionist overachiever, that was me.
Mhm,
And yet they are sensing a sense of calm from me being in my presence. And that is the Quran.
mm,
That's
mm,
when we have to realize that our hearts are so sensitive. Every single day, what we choose to do are
mhm,
affecting our hearts. So either we're carrying the Quran that we recited in the morning around with us, or whatever else we did that morning, which could have been like just a waste of time. And so that's the same kind of interaction with my patients. You know, when they come and see me, I can figure out in like 30 seconds what changes in medication I need to make, or, really from the physiological medical, it does not take long, but I make
mm.
it an intention that every single interaction with this person, first of all, I want them to leave with a sense of joy.
MashaAllah.
I want them to leave with a sense of peace, a sense of calm, trust. And that has to do with me.
Mm.
What is my state, as a healer?
Allahu Akbar.
And part of me being a healer is the Quran.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That's really beautiful. I mean, I was thinking as you were speaking about, the Quran being kind of the ultimate source of dhikr,
Yeah.
and the heart experiencing that itmitnan, yani that stillness, that repose in dhikr.
Mhm.
it seems to suggest to me that the Quran has kind of a calming effect on the hearts of those that recite it. And human beings, Ibn Hazm, the Andalusian scholar, he mentioned that human beings are born in a state of hala, of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That, this is kind of the fundamental human characteristic is hala, is anxiety. Even, Arabic words are amazing because even the word hala, even the word itself, even if you don't know Arabic, it sounds, it almost, the word itself is almost anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
But if you want some repose and if you want some coolness, dhikr, the remembrance of God, is where you will find it. Otherwise, the soul is in a state of irascibility. It's uneasy. It's unsettled. Just by virtue of our humanity, it's unsettled. But when you connect with the words of God, there's a peace, there's a repose, there's a tranquility that one experiences. I'm sure the question often arises, do a lot of women complain that they don't have time to memorize the Quran, because in addition to their professional responsibilities, they also are still carrying the vast majority of the domestic responsibility, the emotional work, looking after everyone, making sure everyone's okay, taking care of the kids. Is that something you encounter often with women that want to memorize the Quran?
It is a very real thing. I'm not gonna, sugarcoat it. Even like for me as a professional, it's my days are busy, and but what I have found with the close women I know that who have memorized the Quran, and what has made a difference in my life is really that honoring the morning time, because we know even that the time after Fajr is Quran, in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us what time should you work on your Quran,
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, like NC Tamara mentions, that the keystone habit is tahajjud. And that's a keystone habit, not just for Quran, but for one's whole life. Really establishing, even if it just means waking up and praying 2 rak'ahs before Fajr. And then that way you pray Fajr on time and you have some time, that blessed time in the morning. So I've seen that the women who are on this journey and serious about it really make use of that time. And I remember my teachers even saying that time is so important because the night is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The day is to be out in the world.
Yes.
Like whatever we're doing, whether it's being a mom, working, teaching, as you do, that you're not going to, for the rest of your life, spend all day with the Quran. Even though there, maybe there's a certain point in your life where that's what you were doing day in and day out as a student, Quran, your studies, but now you're out there in the community. That's what your days are spent doing.
Sure.
The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam too, if we look at his example, the night was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the day was for the people. And that doesn't mean that we stay up all night every night, but it doesn't take much. Can we just devote like 20 minutes after Fajr? And so that to me is the key to that. Is it a struggle? Yes, absolutely. And even for some mothers, even that time they don't have, because there's at a certain point where their children are small, they've got a foot in their face in the morning, and so the responsibilities are kind of 24/7. But I know women who have done it, and that's why I made it a point in the crowning venture to interview all different kinds of women. So women who have 4 children, converts who have memorized the Quran, one woman who started after she was 60 years old. I wanted there to be a story for everybody.
Wow.
So, that's the thing. And also at the same time, having grace and realizing that there may be times, there's seasons in life. We hear this all the time. We
Mhm.
hear it so much, it's almost like it's a cliche, but it's true. Okay, so there may be a few years where, if you have, 3 children under the age of 4,
Mhm.
you might not be able to spend as much time. And guess what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. And
Mhm.
he knows your intention, knows that, okay, you want to be spending more time, but this is an ibadah too, raising your children, raising them well.
Mhm. Yes.
So really, what I'd like to stress is that, at the same time, while we have to also be real and remember that memorizing Quran, it's not like a fard. One can
Mhm.
be an amazing Muslim, without having memorized Quran. But all I urge people is to make an intention and start that journey
Mhm.
and see where it goes. Because every next step, it just naturally comes. First you learn tajweed, then you want to recite through the whole thing to a teacher, and then honestly, for most of the people that I know, when they do that, when they make it a goal, okay, I want to learn tajweed, and a really good goal is let me recite the Quran in its entirety in tajweed to a qualified teacher.
Mhm.
So doing that, number one, now you are familiar with the Quran. You are able to recite it.
Mhm.
You've practiced it a lot. So you've spent that time with it. You become familiar with it.
Mhm.
So I sometimes tell my students, if this question ever comes up, like, should I memorize the Quran or not, or does Arabic matter? Imagine if an enemy of Islam, there are people out there who are not Muslim, maybe who even teach in some universities, who know better Arabic than us. They know the Quran. They maybe have memorized the Quran,
Mhm.
but do they love the Quran? Do they love the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Do they love Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? And imagine if one of those people came up to you, a Muslim, and made up an ayah. Would you be able to say this is an ayah or not? I
Subhan.
mean, even having that ability,
Mm.
it's worth it. So start out step by step. I urge everybody, learn the tajweed, try to recite the whole Quran to a teacher, and then guess what? After that, you'd be surprised what you might find yourself wanting to do, because it might just be that you are now yearning to have the Quran in your heart, which is
Allah.
what happened to a lot of people I know. Once they get to that point, it's like it's a given. There's no question.
So yeah, so some of the stories in your book, I mean, is there? I mean, the book I know is filled with amazing stories. Are there a few that really stand out to you that maybe you'd like to just kind of share some excerpts or share some vignettes from those stories that will encourage people to buy the book, but also maybe like Quranic memorization is something that as women, as men, as Muslims, we can do this. Are there
Mhm.
any stories that really stand out to you?
Oh, absolutely. The very first story that I share is the interview with Charlotte, which is not her real name.
Okay.
This was back in the 80s,
Okay.
maybe 70s, 80s, and she was a convert.
Hmm.
She was dying to be able to read the Quran. She
Hmm.
couldn't find anybody to teach her,
Mm.
because the women, first of all, they themselves were not really qualified to teach,
Hmm.
and it was hard for her to find somebody to teach her. She memorized the whole 30th juz just by listening to a cassette tape.
Wow.
That's how much she loves the Quran. That's how much she loves the Quran. Finally, there was a sheikh who taught her, agreed to teach her, and supported her with her memorization. She said that people would be like, who is this crazy black lady who is, coming to the masjid and like asking us to teach her?
Subhanallah.
Yeah. And she said, I mean, till this day, when I interviewed her, I was literally in tears, because till now you can hear the love that she has for Quran in her voice. Even taking time off to do an interview with me, she was like, I'm teaching children all the time. I'm teaching, that's my life. I'm teaching Quran. I love it. Till now, it's just like, and
Allah.
she now she's the head of the women's affairs at her mosque. So this, look at where she started to where she is now. She said, still, sometimes people will walk into the mosque and be like, why is this Black lady in charge? Who is this? And then she says she recites Quran and, it quiets them down. Now, the sad thing is she should not have to prove herself, first of all, but her story is just beautiful. This woman who fought so hard for what so many of us take for granted. Nowadays it's so easy to find a teacher. You can find one online, you can find one in the opportunities are just endless.
Right. Wow. So the other thing that some of the stories that I've heard about Quranic memorization is that Quranic memorization is often a bit more hidden than some other forms of scholarship. Other forms of scholarship can also be hidden, but usually if somebody is a mufti or a sheikh or a sheikha or an ustad or an ustada, somehow we've been made aware of that. Oh, this is so-and-so, she studied at this place, or this is so-and-so, she has this kind of ijaza. But with Quran, there are many people who have memorized the Quran bitalaqi, with like qualified teachers, and we don't even know who they are. Right? Like you can come into that masjid and somebody might like look at this woman in charge and think, why are you, who are you? What do you know? Like what have you been given authority? Who are you? Not knowing that you're talking to one of the memorizers of the book of Allah. And our teachers, when I was doing hifz, they used to always say, we call the person that memorizes the Quran the hafiz, right? Because they've memorized, and of course have protection. But in order to protect the Quran, Allah Ta'ala has to protect them. So they're really mahfuz, right? So you could be speaking to someone that is mahfuz, bi rahmatillah, and taking them for granted, or not recognizing the sharaf, the honor that God has conferred upon them. So that story just made me, one, appreciate the struggle of that woman, especially as an elder in my own community, and two, just make me reflect on, man, you have to be very careful and just treat everybody with respect, because you really don't know, right? You really don't know. So we have a few minutes. I mean, the connection between the Quran and the Ramadan is, well established, and something that we esteem and enjoy. As a memorizer of the Quran, a teacher of the Quran, how is the month of Ramadan special, significant, unique, for you?
What I love about Ramadan is that everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody is working on a khatam of Quran, trying to recite all the way through or multiple times. So it's just one of those things where in everybody's free time, that's what they're doing. Let me try to, I want to try to get through and recite the whole thing this month. So it's nice because it's one of those times where even during the day, we don't feel guilty, quote unquote guilty, that, I should be doing something else right now. If we really think about our day-to-day lives, a lot of times, it's like, I should be doing something else. I have this responsibility. I have that. I consider in Ramadan, any free moment that we have. And when I say free, I mean that the only things that we should be doing in Ramadan are things that are just absolutely necessary, that need to be done.
Right.
One of my teachers, may Allah bless her, she many years ago gave the most beautiful and useful advice that I have stuck to till now. She said, when it comes to Ramadan, categorize your worries and concerns into three. Number one, it needs immediate attention. So do it, get it done with. So it's not sitting there. Number two, it can wait till after Ramadan. If it can wait till after Ramadan, let it wait till after Ramadan. Right. Do you really have to clean out your closet in Ramadan? No, that's just like, distraction. I mean,
right. You can do that anytime.
Yeah. Ask, like, does this really need to be done now, or can it wait? And then the third one is just absolute nonsense, things that we should not even be holding on to, grudges, whatever, just let them go.
Right.
And then if we really look at it like that, so we're doing the absolute essentials this month, and other than that, our time gets think not even like should, but we get to spend our time reciting Quran. And
Right.
nobody's going to be like, oh, okay, why are you just sitting there? It's the middle of, Wednesday,
Yeah, yeah, no,
afternoon.
no, no, yeah.
It's like, no,
You're
it's not,
right. Yeah, you're right. In Ramadan, everybody's working on a khatam of the Quran. You know.
yeah. And it's beautiful to think that all of that goodness is going out into the world. And then subhanAllah, it's really, it's cleansing. It's an opportunity. And even when it comes to like teaching other classes, I don't usually in Ramadan unless there's something really pressing.
Mhm,
Some of that I put it till after Ramadan, and even when it comes to like, for example, reviewing during Ramadan, I focus more on just reciting through. And
mhm.
because I know that, okay, afterwards I'm going to be back to like the rest of the year is going to be
Yeah.
time for review. But right now it's just like, there's just, something very beautiful about, reciting through, finish, start again,
Mhm,
and you can feel by now
mhm,
we're more than halfway done with Ramadan.
mhm.
There's a cleansing, you
Allahu
know.
Akbar.
It's a
Allah.
part of that forgiveness. It's a part of
Mhm,
the, it's a that's what we all, by the end of Ramadan, we pray that it's an accepted Ramadan and that we come out cleansed, refreshed. And to me, Quranic recitation is a big part of that.
MashaAllah. Well, in light of what you just shared, I don't want to hold you back from the recitation of the Quran. And also too, I mean, I want to thank you for offering your time. It's quite late in Michigan. Um, and like you said, the day is for the people. So this was a day in which you had to work, and you still gave of your time very graciously and very generously. And you've shared some absolute nuggets of wisdom about the Quran, our approach to it. And we at Island would like to thank you for your time and let you know that you are an exemplar and a role model for all of us, brothers and sisters. And I want to offer you a chance to say any parting word of nasiha from which you think we might benefit.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been my pleasure to be here. And what I'd like to offer as a parting is exactly wherever you are in your journey, um, don't beat yourself up. Don't judge yourself. It's never too late. Just make an intention to pick up the Quran. When you have that intention, doors will open. If you don't have a teacher, you know what? The teacher will appear. And, wherever you are in that journey, just take that first step. And like I mentioned before, if memorization seems daunting, that's okay. Just have a relationship with the Quran, whatever that looks like. And if you are even to the point where reading Arabic is daunting, or for whatever reason you're not there, at least there's the translation. Like, just have some kind of relationship. And you know, I challenge, or I invite everybody to just commit those 20 minutes a day
Allah Akbar.
from now till the end of your life. 20 minutes, whether it means I'm
Allah.
reading the translation, whatever point you're at, commit those 20 minutes and just see what doors will open for you and how your life will change.
Well, Jazakillahu khair. May Allah reward you and elevate you, and make this month a special month of the Quran for you, for your family, for your teachers, and we really, really appreciate you giving of your time. So Jazakallahu khair, and we hope to, read the book. We'll discuss the book. I can't wait to share it with both of my daughters. And no, thank you. May Allah reward you.
Okay. It was my pleasure to be here. Jazakallah khair.
Wow, subhanallah. Why are those mine? Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.